essensys, and Ed Cowell, the CEO of Landmark. And I think it might be nice to start if we can just hear from Ed how it's going as the relatively new CEO of Landmark, and I'm sure a lot of probably particularly challenging times, Ed, but perhaps you could just tell us how it's going and your experiences.
Yeah, well, it's always interesting now, when you go through the interview phase, 18 months, when I was going through the interview process in May of 2019, when everything looked rather differently for the sector. And here we are now 18 months in, and certainly we had an excellent first quarter, and we are well ahead of all of our targets, whether that be revenue, profit, occupancy, to now be in the current position we're in. However, these are market conditions. No one calls this a black swan event. We've now just got to cope with them. So it's been a challenging 6 months. We've done everything we can to support our client base. Now we've offered quite a few of them relief of some kind or another. And we're now spending plenty of time dealing with the other great stakeholder in our within our sector, our landlords, and trying to see how they can help us, and how we can work closer together to meet the challenges. Because I do think that we still haven't yet hit the bottom. The bottom, I think, will be at some stage in 2021, but hopefully we'll start to see green shoots at some stage next year. I mean, clearly what we're seeing is not a time-based challenge, it's more of a conditions-based challenge, and any kind of recovery, particularly a demand recovery, will be led firstly by some kind of a vaccine or a change in approach to risk management, and then we'll hopefully see demand and the economy recovering from there. But until that time, it's all about really weathering the storm, because I do think the long-term prospects for the sector, and that's what really interested me about why I joined Landmark. I think the long-term prospects for this sector are tremendous, and I think everyone has got the right to be bullish about the future, but just don't ask me to name when to be bullish and the timing around that, because I say that's going to be conditions based.
Yeah, no, clearly difficult times, but I think the message I'm hearing from all our members is that there's still the eye to the future, and that the part that the flexible workspace sector will play in that recovery and new businesses hopefully growing and taking on space. But it's clearly difficult times at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely, it is challenging.
Yeah. So, James, I think we'll move on to you and perhaps introduce yourself, but also I think you're going to give us a bit of an overview of the topic that we're discussing today.
Absolutely. So my name is James Shannon. I'm from essensys, Chief Product Officer. And at essensys, we power the world's fastest growing and most ambitious flexible workspace operators, including long-standing customers, obviously, such as Landmark. So, we're obviously trying to support our customers through this period. We're looking to innovate in the platform. And security is a key part of how to attract customers, especially enterprise customers, into flexible workspace in this new world that Ed's been talking about. And again, I don't have the when either, but all we can do is make sure we're as prepared as possible to create the tools that provide our customers the ability to monitor and to deploy resources as the space is reoccupied. And yeah, security is a key part of that. And I thought, as you say, just to sort of introduce the session today, it would be useful to sort of visualize security a little bit, because it is a bit of a dry topic, let's face it. I'll try and stay away from the technology, but a little bit of market data, a little bit of sort of insight as to how we think about security at essensys, and also maybe a little bit about security in the future, just to sort of blue sky a little bit to see where it might go, and hopefully that will then provoke sort of questions around these topics and make for an interesting discussion. So without further ado, let's jump in. So hopefully everyone can see the deck. So the Flex Office, securing a workspace. As I mentioned, I mean, how do you approach security? It's such a huge topic. And what we like to do at essensys is often, part of our mission statement, part of our promise to our customers is to try and simplify technology, to try and allow our customers to focus on delivering a great member experience, to focus on supporting their customers and not managing technology on a day-to-day basis. So the way we think about security is really a hierarchy of needs, and that all starts with physical security, because whether it's a new space or an existing space, you have to start by obviously securing the physical doors, the physical space. So it all starts with physical security. And I'll talk a little bit about in a moment how this space has evolved and how we can look to leverage the opportunity around physical security to create an even better member experience. But then you layer on top of that network security. And by network security, I'm of course talking about Wi-Fi. I'm talking about connecting to a wired network. I'm talking about how customers, especially enterprise customers particularly, can feel secure in a flexible workspace that's shared with other customers. And then finally, cybersecurity, which is the final tip of the iceberg or top of the pyramid, which is often forgotten about, and often gains the most publicity, often in a bad way. Which is all about protection against malicious attacks, and which is obviously a moving target compared to physical and network security. So I think we'll touch on all of these topics today. But I particularly wanted to look at this pyramid and hierarchy of needs, because I think it's interesting how it also overlays with the flex-based industry's pain points. So we did some work with Instance, in the last few months, actually just before lockdown, as to what the key pain points were in the flexible workspace industry. And interestingly enough, 3 of these in the top 5 overlay very neatly with what we're talking about today. And that's around door access control, which is all about physical security, and of course wired and Wi-Fi connectivity, which fits squarely into network security. So I think it's quite interesting. It's a relevant topic, particularly post-COVID. But even pre-COVID was very much identified as pain points within the flex workspace industry. So moving on from the pure security topic, how does that impact member experience? Because I think at the end of the day, that's what we're empowering and delivering the tools to enable our customers to deliver is a great member experience. And I think physical security in particular gives us an opportunity to look at that. And so just a few ideas and a few thoughts about how we're looking at improving member experience in the future, allowing our customers to deliver a great interaction paradigm within space. And it all starts with contactless. We all know that post-COVID, there's a big focus on removing contact from space, whether that's the TV remote in the meeting room, whether that's desks, elevators, kitchens, shared workspaces. There's all sorts of spaces and tools and technology that members have to interact with. So one of the things we need to look to do as part of a physical security solution is to look at contactless technology to reduce the amount of contact and reduce the burden on sanitization and increase the sense of security for our members. Then we follow that up with monitoring reoccupancy, because if we're able to monitor how our members are interacting with the space, then that gives us better insight into how our space is being reoccupied, how and where to deploy our resources, which also allows us to manage our costs and our business as we move out of this post-COVID phase. So data and insights are a key part of this. It's not just about securing, it's also about getting insight on how members are interacting with space. But we're also about trying to reduce friction. And this isn't just about contactless. This is also allowing members to get things done quickly. So the ability to book rooms, book desks, get prints from printers, unlock a locker, all of these things are also about reducing friction, which is about creating a better member experience and allowing members to be productive, getting things done quickly. It's also about immediacy. Everyone hates waiting for things, waiting to access things, waiting to get things done. So part of that frictionless experience is creating that immediacy. And flexibility. It's not just about deploying the latest technology, it's also about being flexible. Not everyone likes smartphones, not everyone likes to interact with technology. So it's also important we create flexibility in the workspace to deploy legacy technology or support legacy technologies such as physical access cards, but also embrace the more modern access techniques as well. And finally, it's all about future-proofing for post-COVID. So we're trying to preempt what's going to happen, what's the demands of flexible workspace are going to be, both from the enterprise and from smaller customers, and try and create the tools and opportunities for flexible workspace operators to deliver whatever their members might need, whilst also delivering great member experiences and getting insight into how their space is being utilised and reoccupied. And when one final thought about this is the smart space. And in physical security in particular, how can we enable a space to be smarter? How can we think about space in a different way, and not only as silos of security, but as a more integrated experience? So everything from opening a door in an office or a building, to booking and paying for a meeting room, to private offices, buying a coffee or a beer in the Honesty Bar. Could be booking and paying for a hot desk, tapping to open a secure locker, or even starting a video conference. But even as far as interacting with technology, where traditionally, contact has played a big part. So interacting with printers, for instance, being able to print any printer, then securely collect it using your smartphone without touching, the printer or the panel or any hardware relating to that. So I think the smart space is a big focus for us. I think it's an area where we'll see the biggest change. And as with many things to do with the pandemic, it's been a catalyst to change. A catalyst not only in the market, a catalyst not only as to how our end users, our members want to interact with space, and a catalyst to how companies envisage using space. But I think we also need to think about inside the space, and there's already a lot of thought being given to social distancing and securing a space and counting the amount of people in a space. But we're looking a little bit further than that as to how we can actually smooth out the way that members interact with the space. Using methods that perhaps they're already familiar with, like tap to pay, the ability to tap to open, tap to collect, tap to start, tap to pay, whether that's using credits or cash or whatever. So that's all I wanted to do as an intro this morning. Hopefully it's given a bit of a food for thought and provoked some questions for our discussion. So back to you, Jane.
Hey, thank you very much, James. I think that was really helpful in setting the scene on what is quite a wide-ranging subject. I've got some questions, and also we have got a chat function on the webinar platform. So if anyone watching has something that they particularly want to raise or ask, please type it in. To start with, it's physical security as a topic has obviously been around forever, but why is it particularly important that we revisit this now, especially post-COVID? And perhaps Ed, start with you and hear your thoughts on this.
Absolutely. I think it's worth sort of really examining what's the definition of security, about this, and I think, as you say, it is all encompassing. So to me, it really means, it's security is freedom or resilience against harm caused by others. And one of our key roles is when a client comes to us and says, we would like to take office space with you, then we in essence are taking control of them, their possessions and their information. And we need to ensure, as part of our business proposition, and this isn't something that is something that's we paid for, this is a given. We need to ensure that they have their employees, their information, their visitors, their guests, and then they've got freedom and resilience against harm caused by others in everything they do. Because in essence, they are giving us the privilege of managing their physical and their information business for them, because they'll be using our facilities to do that. And I think that to me is really critical about this. I think I completely agree with James. I don't think that it's more important now. I think what has happened is COVID has accelerated trends that were already occurring pre-COVID. But I do think some of the impacts of the pandemic will certainly will raise physical security as an issue. And again, physical security is quite wide-ranging. So protection of personnel, data, hardware, etc., as we've already covered. But certainly as we move into economic downturns, there is always an increase in criminality, and so it's the physical security of your building, preventing people getting access to it, people trying to break in at the weekends suddenly becomes more important. Then clearly, as James touched upon, there is this whole idea about contactless access. I think one of the things, what the genie will not get back in the bottle about this is our offices will be less dense. This concept of de-densification, I think, is just going to grow more and more. Rather than having, encouraging everyone's employees to come together at the end of each day, to drink beer or coffee, in one's offices. The reality is people are going to want to be safe, less people being more productive, and so contactless and all these technologies will advance and hopefully work together to deliver both a more secure environment, but most importantly, a more productive environment.
Okay, thank you. And James, what would you add to that on that?
Yeah, I think Ed's captured a lot there. I mean, the only thing I would add, I think, is what we have to be careful of. As Ed touched on, COVID's, the pandemic's been a catalyst to all sorts of sort of features of security that were there already, but have been highlighted. I think what we have to try and avoid as an industry is sort of imposing a command and control regime, which is exactly what us as an industry has differentiated ourselves from the enterprise traditionally. Is that and the ethos, culture, freedom of and social contact and all of these great sort of features of the industry. So I think
I think we are possibly slightly losing James there, or is that just me that's seeing that?
No, I can see that too.
Yeah, lose me slightly. Am I back?
You are, but it's a little stilted. So
okay. We'll see how this goes. Okay, looks like it's good again. Yeah, I think it's important not to try and not lose sight of the culture and the ethos and the environments we traditionally try to create in FlexSpace. And I think the way we do that is creating a sort of a menu of tools and try and pick them and deploy them in such a way that still reflects, the culture that you as an operator are trying to create, and that may well be around contactless, it may be around controlling access to space, it may be around how desks are booked or how the spacing is enforced. But I'm always wary of going to the enterprise world of sort of locking down command and control, which is going to backfire somewhat, I think, on the whole sort of culture and ethos that Flex has sort of went out to create in the first place. So I think it's always a delicate balance.
Yeah. So I mean, Ed, just building on that, is there a danger of going too far and with physical security on that, the member experience in being impacted negatively?
I completely agree with James here. I mean, what people want is ever greater flexibility, and it's they want to be able to consume in the way they wish to. So I think you've also got to bear in mind we have certain clients who want very high levels of security, which we have to give them. And again, it depends on the nature of the client's business. But that therefore means we need to be ever more flexible, and to be able to offer, exactly as James touched upon, a menu of options to them depending on their own requirements. But the key, regardless of who you are, is that you've got to offer this very high level of security, but you also need to be unobtrusive. But most importantly, the easiest to do business with. That will be the key differentiator. If you can offer everything and be very easy to do business with, your business will only grow and your reputation will only grow. But the underpinning all of that is the ability to be flexible.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to the network security. Why should Wi-Fi security not be underestimated, and what are the considerations in a flexible workspace environment in particular? James, start with you on that.
Absolutely, and this is a frequently visited topic, and one I speak to customers very often about. Wi-Fi is great. Everyone loves it. It's almost become a feature, a table stakes for our industry, because everyone expects to walk into space and use Wi-Fi. And I think one of the things we have to be careful of, especially as in the market that we're now in, which is where enterprises are looking for workspaces that offer the right level of security for them, is as operators to be very clear as to what the difference is between coffee shop Wi-Fi and enterprise Wi-Fi. Yeah. And I'm keeping it deliberately high level, without dropping into technical details. But the concept of I'm going to call it coffee shop Wi-Fi, but the idea of a single network with a single password that's shared by everybody is not going to attract an enterprise customer into a flexible workspace. So it's really important, that it's understood that what an enterprise customer is looking for is a unique network for them, that they are separated from other customers using that space. So that's number one. And the second is ideally individual logins for each of their users. That way, as users come and go from their organization, they don't need to reissue passwords, or they can just disable that user, as any enterprise would do as a normal course of business. So we're really just looking to reflect how an enterprise would normally work. And really, as they look down their checklist of things that they might want to see in a more flexible space that they're looking to use as we come out of the pandemic, then one of the first things they'll look for is, can I have a separate network? Does that apply to Wi-Fi too, not just a wired network? And can I have individual logins for my user? And really, it's as simple as that. And that's the difference between an enterprise Wi-Fi and a copy shop Wi-Fi, which is one password for everyone, one network for everyone. And therein lies future problems and vulnerabilities, which enterprises are not going to go for.
Ed, is that your practical experience as an operator of how this goes?
Yeah, absolutely. It's exactly that. I mean, I want to sort of step back and think, what is the threat here? And what do our customers see? And if you really, I was on a link earlier doing some research for this. CSO Online. It's not a website I regularly visit, but certainly I want to look at this morning, and an SME last year, in the last 12 months. One SME has been hacked in the UK. There's a data breach with an SME in every 19 seconds is one of the facts. 37% of UK companies have reported a breach to the Information Commission Office in the last 12 months. When you think about what with the average thing, most people carry, between 2 and 3 wireless devices themselves. If you think and come in and link to our link into our Wi-Fi's in our buildings, that is just a treasure trove of information, both about businesses, both about people's personal lives, for our customers. That would, and when you look at the threat, you then look at the opportunity that's there. Is therefore absolutely incumbent on us, to make sure that our Wi-Fi, exactly as James has described, is as secure as possible. And that is around, and the reality is, the greatest chance of there being a breach is through an individual making a mistake, either sharing their password, losing something, the login, not following the correct protocols, and therefore it's absolutely critical that we, as the first service operator, therefore provide the securest and give them those layers of defense they need to protect our customers' information. And also thinking about it from the customer's perspective. I mean, again, if the stats are to be believed, when a company has a data breach, clearly there's the cost of that individual data breaches, to them financially, but then there's that loss of faith of their own customers in them as having had that data breach. So it's absolutely incumbent upon us to ensure that we make sure that our Wi-Fi security is as good and as robust as it possibly can be.
Yeah, the stakes are very high, aren't they? You set it out like that. There's a lot to be thinking about, and clearly a lot that can go wrong if the protection isn't there. So Ed, what about customers that don't want to use Wi-Fi? Are there ways that you address their needs for secure connectivity in other ways?
Absolutely. So again, we look at every customer as an individual, and you absolutely have to. And this goes back to the flexibility. And we engage with them on every level to understand how they want to consume information, data, and their needs. And we offer them everything from building their own network, is that something they would like, right the way to allowing them, as long as there are the right permissions within the building, to do it themselves and to integrate. Clearly when you're in a multi-tenanted site, it makes it more difficult. But we try and work with our customer in every way to ensure that their information security needs are met.
Yeah, and James, are there other things that people could be thinking about on this?
Definitely. I mean, wired network is very popular with enterprise, and they will look for exactly the same profile as Wi-Fi. They'll want to ensure that the port they're plugging into is not connected to other companies' offices in the same building. So they want assurance that, again, their wired network, in the same way as their Wi-Fi network, is segregated from others. To ensure that they've got the privacy and the security that they would expect in an enterprise building. And I think therein lies the sort of the double-edged sword, because there is work in maintaining separate, ports, physical ports for different customers. There is work in maintaining separate passwords and Wi-Fi networks with different customers. So it's really important that you use a system that your community managers, your space managers can use quickly and easily to maintain that, because as Ed's touched on briefly, often the biggest cause of security breaches is human error. It's not the technology itself, it's a shared password, it's a forgetting to disable someone when they left, it's forgetting to configure something because you have to do it in 3 different systems. So the more we can eliminate human error, the more we can consolidate onto a single platform, the more we can automate, then the less human error there'll be, and therefore the less vulnerabilities there'll be to security. So it's all around, generally in security, we talk about mitigating human error, because you can have the securest system in the world, but at the end of the day, it's configured, operated, and maintained by us or by our operators and our customers. So it's really important to keep things simple. So when all our moves, adds, and changes that happen on a daily and weekly basis in our spaces, it has to be really easy to onboard a customer, add users, remove users, disable users, and configure offices and spaces and so forth, so that it's really easy to ensure you can maintain that level of security. And the more rigorous of enterprise customers will ask about those processes. How many systems have you got to change when one of my users leaves? How many systems have you got to change when I need another access card or I disable an access card? These are sort of questions that I would be asking, and the simpler, the more efficient the process is from an operator standpoint, the more comfort an enterprise customer will have.
Okay, so moving on to cyber security, and Ed touched on the number of devices that we're all walking around with. So what steps can operators take to mitigate the risk of having such a large number of devices connected to their network? And James, perhaps again start with you on that one.
Sure. Well, I think segregation is the first step. So smaller networks of fewer devices are always easier to manage and secure than one huge network of lots of devices. So hence why customer segregation or customer segregation is really important, because then you get insight into how each individual customer and each individual network group of users is using the network. I think cyber security is one of the sort of invisible threats. I think it's less tangible than Wi-Fi and network connectivity, because we don't physically interact with it. We don't on a daily basis. I think it's one of the things that is often thought about. Is often thought about too late, because as is often the case with security, it's not. No one doesn't really get up the agenda or the priority stack until it's too late. And it's very hard when you've already deployed many spaces and lots of networks to then go back and retrofit the required security for this. So I think the key thing with cybersecurity is to make sure that it's built in from the beginning, to make sure that your team don't have to manage it, because cybersecurity, unlike network and Wi-Fi, it doesn't just change on a daily and weekly basis. It changes on an hourly basis, and it's happening all over the world. And you need to be using a platform that's managing that on your behalf and dealing with those threats and manage and assuring you that your back is covered in terms of those threats to your customers. So most importantly for me is to address it early, have it in the foundation of your planning for all your spaces, and ensure that it's managed by an entity or a platform that has the resource and the frequency of updates that gives you the assurance that you can then pass on to your customers.
Okay, thank you. So Ed, picking up on that as well, but perhaps you could also identify what some of the risks are to operators if they just ignore this.
Well, I was going to say the risks are pretty, as we've already touched upon. It's if you have subpar solutions, and again, I think James is exactly right. This is all about picking the right technological partner to work with, ensuring that they update, and put patches on all the time. They're continuously living. This is such an organic and dynamic area. It is critical that you have the right partner involved. If you don't have that and you have a subpar solution, in the worst case scenario, you're looking at a breach, a breach of some kind, whether that be cryptojacking, ransomware, all the various things that are out there. But it doesn't just undermine you as the operator; it undermines the customer, it undermines our clients, it undermines their clients, and the that the level of fines, never mind the financial impact, but the reputational damage, if you breach any data regulations with the information commissioner, your reputation is lost instantly. I mean, the recent ransomware attack with Garmin. I mean, I don't know how many people were, but that was, they were offline for 2 weeks. You wonder what reputational damage has been to them since this. And every company carries that same risk now. The bigger we carry a greater risk, because that element of protection is being outsourced by the SME or the enterprise clients to us, and so we need to treat everything they have with as if it's gold.
Okay, and are there any other risks, James, that you'd like to?
No, I mean, I think the Garmin's a great example of the impact of that kind of breach. It's not just a technical one. It's not just a data one. It's a public relations and public profile impact when that happens. And I think, as Ed touched on at the very beginning of this session, it's not just the impact to the company itself, but then the reputational knock-on impact to each customer who is using that space and associated with that operator. So it really is a domino effect. And in our industry, it's not just a single corporate, it's the knock-on effect to those that are using that space and that operator. So I think we have to be really careful and be fully eyes open about the severity and the order of magnitude of the sort of domino effect that can happen when it's always too late once it's happened. So think early. And get something in place that mitigates this risk, so that you're not in a position where you're having to firefight and address it after the fact.
Okay, thank you. So, in sort of drawing to a close, we've covered a lot of ground, and a lot of it is clearly quite technical. And I'm conscious that we have, as an association, we have members of all sizes, and we have some very large operators, but we also have lots of people running single business centres. So for all of those, what tips would you give around some key considerations that should be given to when implementing the topics that we've been talking about this morning? Ed, perhaps go to you first on that.
We clearly have, I look at this in sort of layers of defence. We've got our own staff who are always able to point people in the right direction. And we've got a vastly experienced technology team led by Luke Andrews, who has been in this industry for last sort of 12 to 15 years, man and boy, in terms of putting together his technology solutions. And got a really deep understanding, particularly about client needs and the impacts they have on us. But the reality is, we rely on our experts. And the people that we partner with, and the people we partner with are essensys, and you've got to rely on them to actually be able to give you, that up-to-date advice. And I'd recommend that you can't get enough advice in this area, and it is so critical to you.
Okay, and James, your top tips on this topic?
Yes, tips. 3 top tips. I mean, it's all about trust. Everything from the customer trusting you to you trusting your partner. So that the trust has to go all the way up the chain. So the first thing is to think holistically. So don't try and tackle each one of these parts of security individually. Don't try and tackle access control separately, cybersecurity separately, network security. They're all intertwined. They all need to be managed carefully. And again, one of the premise that the good security is built on is simplicity. So think holistically, try and deal with a few vendors as possible, because the more vendors you deal with, the additional complexity, the more management, and the more cracks there will be between the responsibility and the line of trust, all the way from the customer through us as operators to the vendor. So think holistically, think simply. And minimize the overhead for your team to manage it. I think, because increasingly now more than ever, it's all about differentiating member experience and differentiating the service we can deliver as an industry to the end customer. And the last thing your team should be worrying about is crypto jacks and ransomware attacks, and how to manage Wi-Fi 6 and how to manage contactless, physical space interaction. They should be focusing on the customer. So finding a partner that can deliver that in a way that your team can maintain easily with all the moves, adds, and changes, and deliver that great contactless, sort of frictionless member experience while maintaining security all through the stack. That's the path to success.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope that everyone's watching this has found it useful. I think there's lots of food for thought there. There's some scary things as well to be maybe thinking about, but hopefully it has been demonstrated that there are practical solutions as well to give everybody the sort of peace of mind that's needed on this area. So thank you very much, Ed and James, for sharing your thoughts and knowledge on this, and to everyone for watching. We have a couple more webinars in the planning at the moment. Don't yet have dates fixed, but we will share that information shortly. But thank you very much, everybody, for taking part today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Goodbye.
Bye. Cheerio.